Hi. We're continuing today our conversation about the sixth commandment, which simply says, "You shall not commit adultery." I started last week with the suggestion that to properly understand this commandment and to properly obey it, we ought to have a good understanding from Scripture about marriage. And I suggested that there are four biblical principles, we might call them foundations for marriage. And last week we looked at the first of those foundations, that we are created in God's image, and that means male and female. We saw that at the end of Genesis chapter 1, where God, speaking to himself, said, "Let us create man in our image." And then in the next verse it says that he did create us in his image, male and female. The second of the principles we find first in Genesis 1 verse 28 and also in Genesis 9 verse 1. So in Genesis 1:28, after the creation, after God made us in his image, male and female, it says that he blessed them and he told them to be fruitful and multiply. The Genesis 9 account is following the worldwide flood in which God destroyed every living creature on the earth, not those in the water because they could swim, but the birds and the animals that crawled on the earth and all humans except those whom he preserved in the ark. So when Noah and his wife and his 3 sons and their wives came out of the ark, God again told them to be fruitful and multiply. So this is the first of God's commandments, and it establishes God's plan for the world. And we talked about in the last commandment, the fourth commandment, how the family is established as the foundational building block for society. And here God creates the family by telling the first man and the first woman to be fruitful and multiply. But what we see here in this principle for marriage is the purpose. The original and first purpose for marriage is to multiply. So the whole of chapter 1 of Genesis and much of chapter 2 we call the creation account. Chapter 1, a day-by-day accounting of what God did. Most of chapter 2 is a looking into specifically the last of the days of creation and how he went about the creation of the man and the woman. And so God is creator. Beginning from Genesis chapter 1 verse 1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. So then when he commanded us within this relationship of husband and wife to be fruitful and multiply, he's establishing the purpose for that relationship, and that is that we are invited to join him in the creative process. I think it's reasonable for us to say that since we are created in the image of God, God continues to create through us in his image. And so it was God's desire that the earth be populated with his image, that the earth be populated with the children of the first man and the first woman on down through the generations. And so being fruitful and multiplying then becomes a foundation for this relationship and a purpose. It also indicates to us that this relationship is unique in this matter in that it has the possibility, it has to have the possibility of procreation. Now, I'm not saying that every married couple is going to have kids. My life is an example of that. I have 2 children with my late wife. She died in 2006. I remarried, and I do not have children with my second wife. And she was single her whole life before we married, and we do not have children. And so there are a variety of reasons that can happen in a person's life, in a couple's life, that they will not have children. And yet, scripturally and foundationally for this relationship that we are calling marriage, and in order for us to understand the commandment not to commit adultery, we need to understand that marriage has the biological possibility of creating children. And that it is a man and a woman that must be involved biologically. Now, it's possible that in the future we will be able to manipulate our science in such a way that, heaven forbid, we play God and create humans apart from a male and a woman, and those two parts of those cells coming together, because that, I think, would be a violation of this commandment also. So 2 foundations, 2 principles at this point that form the foundation for marriage to help us understand and be obedient to this commandment. That it's a part of the way God created things. That He created us male and female. And that secondly, He invited us to join Him in populating the earth with His image. To join Him in the creative process. And that He created us uniquely to be joined for that process. So I'll invite you to join me again in the next couple of weeks as we look at 2 more of the principles that Scripture speaks to us about marriage, so that obeying the commandment is not simply not committing adultery, but that it is about living a chaste and holy life. That it is about husband and wife loving and honoring each other. That ultimately it is about honoring the way God made us and the relationships that God designed us to be in. Thank you for listening, and God bless you.